And I think the other point to mention is, and again, it sort of comes back down to the communication, but really setting up regular feedback and reviews of the pipeline with your distributor to understand where they are. If they're sort of struggling with a particular account, understand why. What are the challenges that they're facing? Do you need to go and spend time with them in that particular account to try and help them through that? And again, it comes back down to the support for them in the field. So there's some of the sort of important points I'd mention around managing distributors.
Welcome to the Hands-On Business Podcast. Where else are you going to come to get tips, tricks, and advice on growing your business? As you know, what people tend to love about this podcast is that it is a place where you can hear real business leaders discussing systems, methodologies, and strategies that they have used to help them catapult growth in their business. So I'm your podcast host, Hakeem Adebiyi, and I've grown several small businesses to multi-million-pound enterprises and noticed that there wasn't really a place that focused on where I was, i.e. growing a small business. All of the content that seemed to be out there was about big business and often just a lot of theory and no practical implementable advice, which is exactly why I set up this podcast. So take a listen, enjoy, and start implementing the strategies that you hear on the podcast. Happy listening.
So one of the biggest challenges that companies face when they're trying to expand and they're trying to go global and try to go into export markets is identifying the right distribution partners. So the first question to you, Nishant, is, in your experience, what's the most important qualities to look for in a distributor?
Yes, sure. I think when I talk about my experience here, I will largely be referring to our experience in the US market. Our device was cleared by the FDA in sort of late 2017. So 2018 was when we launched into the US market. And we took the approach of building out an independent distributor network. There are a couple of reasons why we chose that route. I think it was a very cost-effective route rather than trying to build our own sales force, which something we may have considered later on. So really, we took the route of working with independent distributors. Now, how did we identify the right partners to work with? I think now, looking back, where we had a lot of experience, I can really kind of with clarity, describe some of the qualities that we would be looking for and were looking for at the time. I think, firstly, the experience that these distributors have in your particular field or niche. In our case, our device was used in the field of obstetrics, childbirth. So really, we were looking for distribution partners that had experience within this field. And that can really boil down to sort of two things: product and market knowledge. If we look at product knowledge specifically, what type of products were they already selling? Were they selling products in the obstetric space? Were they selling, for example, single-use disposable items versus capital equipment and sort of longer-term products? Did they have experience with the sales cycle for selling medical devices in this particular field? So that's really important. Are they able to take a product from an initial meeting all the way through that sales cycle and understand the relevant stages, within your field specifically, because there is nuance to this depending on the type of device that you're selling. So really experience in the field, product knowledge I mentioned, and then also market knowledge. For instance, who are the key hospital groups within their market or within their territory? What are the reimbursement pathways for these particular types of products? Who are the key opinion leaders, for example, in that particular field? So I think really experience in that particular field is a really important quality to look for initially. Okay. Yes. And then I guess, if I were to think about other qualities, I think another really important quality is the relationships that they already have within that particular field. For instance, if you're selling a medical device, again, in obstetrics, and you're trying to sell into hospital groups as the end customer, who are the decision makers within these hospital groups, hospital systems, and do they already have relationships with these key decision makers? Because I think if you're working with a distributor that is having to build those relationships from scratch, that can add on a significant amount of time to the sales cycle. But if they already had relationships in that particular field, that can have a huge impact as well.
What Nishant's saying there is some of the key things that you need to be looking at is experience, in terms of, have they launched that product? Do they have experience? Have they launched a product similar to that? If you're launching a product, have they got understanding of the sales cycle? Have they got product knowledge experience? in that marketplace? Do they have market knowledge? Do they understand what's going on in the market so that actually that it's going to be a much easier opportunity for them to get into that market? Do they have, what are their relationships like? Do they have key opinion leader relationships? Do they have relationships with the decision makers? So yeah, it really, what we're saying at the moment is there's a lot of parameters that you need to look at, and there are a few of them. So yeah, carry on, Nishant. I thought it was just useful to recap that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the other couple of qualities to mention are, looking at a lot of these distributors, they will be selling several different products, in that particular field. So really having an understanding of the number of products they're currently selling, the types of products that they're selling, are they similar products to the product that you're trying to bring to the market? Are these high value products, or are they sort of lower value, higher volume products? Because really the ability to move through the sales cycle can vary significantly depending on high value versus high volume. The number of products they sell is also important because it gives you a gauge on the level of commitment that they will be putting forward towards your product as well. Because I think one of the challenges that comes with independent distributors is if you have several products in your bag, and say some of these products you've been selling for many years into the market, and it is sort of a recurring income for the distributor. Whereas if you're bringing them something new, there is going to be a level of time commitment upfront to try and launch a new product into the market. So really just to make sure that they don't have too many things in their bag already, and that they are willing to commit the required amount of time and investment to your product. Other things to mention sort of tied in with that, do they have experience in new product launches, for example? And it sort of ties back to the same point. They may have products that they've been selling for many years, and actually there's not really too much sales required for some of these products that they've already been selling. Whereas if you're bringing something new to the market, there will be an element of, trying to sell a new device, launch a new product, convince clinicians potentially to change their practice. So there is that sort of sales experience and sales skills. Do they have that experience in launching new products? That can really make or break your success in that market as well.
Thanks very much, Nishant. And I bang on about this all the time, to be honest, because this is the first step. Once you know which markets you're going into, what Nishant has described is actually having almost like a checklist. And I describe that as my ideal distributor profile, which then includes all those criteria that Nishant has just mentioned. And obviously you'd expect that I have a template for this and a process for this in my program, and I go into it in a lot of detail because it's obviously a critical element of the export journey. But what I try to say to people all the time when you're looking for a distributor, and I think Nishant's articulated it really well, is when you're recruiting a distributor, approach it like you're recruiting a CEO. And that's what an ideal partner profile will allow you to do, because that's effectively a job description and a role profile. And then you'd headhunt against that profile, because that's what you do if you're recruiting a CEO. Do not, whatever you do, leave it to chance that you're just going to bump into the right distributor, an exhibition, or you look online and you find somebody. Because if you do that, you're going to join the many companies that have come to me with horror stories about what happened when they didn't go through the right process. It's critical that you focus on those elements that Nishant just mentioned, because remember, the way you start will more often than not determine the success trajectory of your distributor and hence your business. So that's all about finding that distributor, is at making sure you're going through a very clear process of what you need for success for that or from that distributor in that market. So let's say, for example, now we've been through the strategies that I teach on the program. You've listened to Nishant, and you've now got the best distributors that you could hope for within those specific markets. Let's now move on to actually managing them, because the first step is obviously getting the right distributor. But just if you just leave them to their own devices, even if they're great, they're not probably going to deliver the sort of results that you would want them to deliver. So the question is, Nishant, what once you've found the distributor, what's the best way to effectively manage those relationships to ensure that you deliver success with them?
Yeah, I think the probably the number one sort of strategy to use in managing these distribution partners is communication. We sort of had the experience when if we did not hear from distributors for maybe a few weeks at a time, that was typically not a good sign, because the distributors have really performed well for our product launch in the US market were the distributors that communicated with us regularly. Some of them communicated on a daily basis. They, for example, may have been in a hospital visit meeting with a clinician. Some questions came up that they were unsure of, and immediately that day we'd get an email saying, this question came up. What is the best way to sort of address that? And we knew that the distributors that, it goes two ways, that they communicated with us, we communicated with them regularly. They were the distributors that performed well because we could really address any challenges that came up, almost in real time. So I think communication is critical. An example of a strategy that we used is we typically try to catch up with our distributors, every 2 weeks on a Friday afternoon. We could then really get a sense of their activities over that 2 week period, understand the accounts they had visited, the clinicians that they had spoken with, the challenges that may have came up. And also just to understand, particularly in some of the big key accounts that they were targeting, how they were progressing through the sales cycle. So really communication, I would say, is really critical, a critical strategy to manage these distributor relationships. I think a second important point is support for your distributors. Again, really is a sort of a two-way street. That you appoint these distributors because you're both trying to achieve success, whether it's you're trying to expand into a new market, distributor is trying to build their own business as well and build their portfolio of products. So really, how can you support each other so you both have success in the market? Support can come in the way of many forms. It can be with marketing. We typically had a lot of marketing materials that we built up over the years. Marketing materials, brochures on our product, sort of summaries of the clinical data, and sort of lots of other things around marketing. So we would typically, provide our distributors all of the marketing resources that they needed. They didn't have to build anything from scratch. We sort of had everything ready to share with them. That really helped set them up for success. And I think really sort of the third point to mention is spending time with your distributors. And a lot of things have changed over the years. There's a lot of remote communication now, but we really made a huge effort to spend time with them in person. And this is particularly crucial in the early stages of the relationship because these distribution partners are going out to speak with clinicians potentially for the first time, to try and articulate the value behind this new product. But if you can be there early on and be in those meetings with them, and actually lead those meetings with the clinicians to really explain and share, how to articulate the value, how you sort of sell the value behind your product, and allow your distributors to learn from you firsthand. So I think, being in the field with them is hugely important as well, and especially in those early days. Other sort of strategies to mention are just sharing successes. If you're working with several distributors, maybe in different markets, in our case, the US market, we worked with 7 or 8 distributors at one point, sharing successes amongst the distributors. It could be sharing successes, sharing learnings. It could be sharing challenges that have been faced. And if you're able to sort of share that information so that distributors are working as one and collaborating with each other, that really does speed up the sort of knowledge, adoption amongst your distribution partners. And I think the other point to mention is, and again, it sort of comes back down to the communication, but really setting up regular feedback and reviews of the pipeline with your distributor to understand where they are. If they're sort of struggling with a particular account, understand why. What are the challenges that they're facing? Do you need to go and spend time with them in that particular account to try and help them through that? And again, it comes back down to the support for them in the field. So there's some of the sort of important points I'd mention around managing distributors.
No, thanks very much, Nish. And what's coming through very loud and clear is, to lend the phrase from Tony Blair and try to pervert it, communication, isn't it really? Because everything you've mentioned there is really about communication, because you can't support your distributors if you're not communicating, you don't know what they need. Spending time with them in the field, sharing successes, regular feedback and reviews. Every 2 weeks you were meeting with your distributors. And I suggest that, anyone who's managing distributors or wanting to go into export, that they really think clearly about the time that's required and also the finance, because if you're going to be going into the field, that requires a budget. And if you're going to be doing support materials, that requires a budget. So it's not just an easy win of, I've now got a great distributor and they're going to do everything. It really is about managing it. And what I always say to people, and I always try to simplify things in my own mind, that distributor is effectively your sales team in that new market. And if that distributor or that sales team was working directly for you, how would you manage them? you would do all the things that Nishant has said. You go out in the field with them, you would speak to their customers, you would meet with their customers, you'd support them, you'd give them materials. And that's effectively what Nishant is suggesting. So that's for me, those key things that come out, and having, within those regular reviews, having KPIs so that everybody knows what they're trying to achieve. And one of the best ways to do that, and I'll get into that in another session, is about making sure that you tie all this off in your partnership agreement right at the beginning, because that way you have a lot less issues as you move down the line, because then you know what you're expecting from your distributor, and the distributor knows exactly what they're going to get back from you. So moves us smoothly on to the next question, which is about, you've got the right distributors, you're managing them effectively. How do you deepen that relationship? Because that's how you then lead to real acceleration and growth, to make sure that you're actually building a true partnership, rather than, well, I'm the manufacturer, you're the distributor, and this is just a transactional relationship. How would you suggest you go about turning those relationships into true partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, there's several things that we did over the years. I think, obviously it starts off as a business relationship. You're trying to bring a new product to the market. Your distributors are trying to, expand their portfolio and increase their profitability. But I think getting to know your distributors, sort of outside of that business relationship, these are typically people that you'll be working with, for several years in some cases. You'll be spending a lot of time with them in person, in the field. Get to know them. A lot of distributors that I worked with over the years, I've become good friends with now. And, although I'm not working with them anymore, we still keep in touch. So get to know them on a personal level, because at the end of the day, you got to enjoy the process as well. It's not all serious. It's not all business. You got to have some fun with it too. So get to know the distributors. Some of the practical ways that you might do that is, hold an annual meeting for your distribution partners. In the US, for example, we did that. We got all of our distributors together in a more social environment. But of course, we had a detailed agenda to sort of run through during those annual meetings. And in those meetings, you can sort of the successes that distributors have had. You can share, how distributors are performing. Share some really big key wins from particular distributors or particular reps. If they've opened up, one of the key hostile groups on the East Coast, for example, really get them to share that as a case study. So really share learnings amongst your distributors, and that way you can show the potential, value of your product. If distributors see success that others are having, that can translate into their territory, it gets them excited about success in that particular territory as well. And I guess, there's other things you can do. I think an important point is, particularly in our case, especially with some of these medical device businesses, if you have success in the US market, for example, there is the potential to be acquired at a later date, a few years down the line. And a lot of that success and value behind your business will come through the success that the distributors have had. So they're very aware of the potential for the business to be acquired, and they may lose that product even after, maybe several years of hard work of building a business. So how do you sort of deepen the relationships around those sort of concerns that distributors might have early on? And for example, with some of our partners, we did within our contracts, we included a sort of a bonus payment on exit, for example. And I think that can really deepen the relationships, because then you're both in it for the long term. So yeah, that's just a few ideas, and I'm sure there's many other things that you can sort of think about.
Yeah, no, there is, but they're really clear and important ones, and it's about, which is exactly what Nishant's saying, it's about treating them as a partner. So like the exit bonus payment, for example, how motivated are you going to be? Because one of the biggest issues that distributors have, where they hold back from actually working full pelt on a particular product, is, yeah, but we're going to introduce it. It's happened to us before. And then you sell, within a year's time, we do loads of work, you sell it, and we lose our revenue. If they know actually you're going to get an exit bonus, then firstly, you've been honest with them that you might exit, so they appreciate the honesty and the integrity. But secondly, you're saying, well, but if that happens, you're going to share in that, so they are going to work even harder. Because I can assure you, lots, and I'll say most manufacturers, not lots, but most manufacturers will not think about giving an exit bonus at all to their distributors. And I can attest directly to the relationship that Nishant had with his distributors, specifically because of the way he managed them when he was working with them. So the simple thing for me is for everybody, including myself, to ask the question, do we currently invest in building relationships with our distributors, both financially and in time, as Nishant said, offering regular training and updates, being in the field with them, co-marketing opportunities, visits to their facilities, them visiting you, holding annual distributor meetings, and it may well be in the market, it may well be in your factory, if you have a factory, and then, sharing best practice, collaborating and sharing learnings amongst your partners. Because as I said before, it's all about making them feel part of the team. And remember what I said on Tuesday about the vision. If they feel that they are part of your vision and you vetted them against that, so you know that they're coming in and they buy into what you're trying to do, you'll be absolutely amazed how much a distributor will invest when they can see that you see them as a partner and not just a transaction, a way to make loads of money for your product in the market. So, as always with these things, I put in a short session because I know that people are really busy and they don't have loads and loads of time. But, just the questions. Well, there's actually one more question I want to focus on, is in terms of growing distributor relationship for expansion, once a distributor relationship has been established, and hopefully you've now got them on side, they're working hard for you. How do you ensure that you can reward them? Because you're going to have a variety of distributors. Some are going to be performing very well. Some are not going to be performing that great. How do you start to reward them, to keep them motivated, to keep them going? Not so they start off, it goes really well, and then they start plateauing off because they've got several other products to work with. Have you got any examples of how you've done that to ensure that growth just continues on and becomes consistent?
Yeah, I think, there's several things that you can think about. You can be quite sort of creative around incentivizing your partners. I think, one thing to sort of mention is when you do take on a distributor partnership and you're agreeing territories and, they may tick off, all of the criteria that we've sort of discussed already. Often you don't know how successful they're going to be until they're actually out there selling in the field. That's a bit of a challenge because often they'll say they have the relationships and they'll do all of these things, but sometimes it doesn't sort of come to fruition once they're actually in the market. So one way you can manage that is, maybe giving them a smaller territory to start with the incentive that if they have success in those initial territories, they have the option to take on additional territories and expand their coverage. So in the US, for example, working with a distributor, they may take on 2 or 3 states to start with the plans, if they have success in those markets, that actually you'll double that coverage to 6 states. So that's really creating an additional market opportunity for the distributor. So it will incentivize them in the sense that if they have success, in those key territories, that they have the opportunity to sort of double their coverage and double their potential, revenues in the market. So I think that's important. I think I talked about, sharing learnings from distributors. I think it's quite interesting in our case with the US, we created a sort of a monthly newsletter where we could actually rank the distributors in terms of how they're performing against each other. So creating a bit of friendly competition amongst your distribution partners as well can help drive their sort of investment in the product and their sort of drive to growth and adoption. Various other things, obviously when you're putting together these contracts, you're going to have, initial targets in there for the first year or two. So obviously targets to incentivize them. We set up a few new things at the individual rep level within these distributors as well. We sort of agreed bonuses with them for the first accounts that they opened. The individual rep would be getting paid a bonus. So I think there's lots of creative things you can do around incentives just to try and sort of get them excited about expanding in their market.
Excellent. So effectively what you're saying really, and I keep coming back to it because I keep saying I'm a very simple individual. You're managing them like you would manage a sales team because they are essentially your sales team in that market. So you're not distinguishing between they are external company or whether they work for you, because the things you're talking about, try giving them slightly different markets to give them an incentive to actually work harder, targets down to an individual level, bonuses for opening new accounts. Those are all the sorts of things that you would do if you had an internal sales team. So that's what you're saying effectively, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, without getting into too much detail, there's other practical things that you can do around, particularly when you, in those initial 6 months that you're working with them. Some of the things that we did, if they were to identify, for example, the top 5 accounts within their territory, for us, it was by birth volumes. The top 5 accounts, for example, we would be willing to support an initial discounted offer to that hospital to really get them going. So there are, if you're getting down into the real details, there are very specific things that you can do to try and encourage them to open up these large accounts. But again, you can be quite creative with that. But again, it comes back down to really just supporting them. So you both have success in the market.
Excellent. So on this point, because there's one of the questions I was going to ask, but Barry McCann from Newer Surgical, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, Barry, has just asked a question, and I felt I should take it because I think it's in the US, which means it's quite early in the US. So I appreciate you coming on this early, Barry. So the question is, Nish, did you have to drop any distributors for poor performance, and did that impact positively or negatively the performance of your other distributors?
Hi, Barry. Thanks for the question. Hope you're well. I'm not sure if you're in the US or you're back at home, but I'm sure we'll catch up properly soon. Yes, we certainly had distributors that did not perform as well. And again, it comes back to the point where you often don't see that until you're sort of 6 months down the line. And especially with these new product launches, that there is a sales cycle, there is a time lag. It does take time to start seeing adoption in the market. But yes, you do get a sense of, the distributors that you have. And you can see, who's performing, who is not performing, who's asking questions, who's not asking questions, who's not really out there seeing as many customers as you would expect them to be doing. So we did have to let go of a couple of distributors. Did that impact the performance of other distributors? I mean, not so much, because, the distributors are very much sort of segregated into their specific territory. So they continued with business as normal. The challenge is that, particularly when you're working in these kind of, niche fields, in obstetrics, for example, there really is only a handful of distributors out there in the market in those particular territories. So actually the question you have to ask yourself is it better to keep a distributor in the market that's maybe not performing as well as the others? Or is it better to have them completely, out of the market and not selling your product? Are they potentially doing damage to your product? Why they're not performing? Are they saying incorrect things when they're meeting clinicians? Are they not articulating the value correctly behind your product? And so that's what you really have to weigh up. Is it better to have someone there that's able to, fulfill orders? Or is it better that they're out of the market? So we did make the decision to let go of some of our distributors. There are a couple that are kind of in that middle ground where they're not performing very well. They're not performing badly. And in those cases, the decision was made to spend more time with them, coach them through the challenges that they were facing. And in those cases where we dedicated more time to those partners, we did see their success improve over the coming years. I don't know if that answers your question, but it probably took a long way around to answer that.
It's certainly, I'll wait for Barry to respond on the messaging, but certainly from my point of view, Nish, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? You've got to weigh up the pros and the cons of having somebody in the market. And I think someone once said to me that and I'm not trying to be disparaging to anybody, but the worst kind of salesperson, not just distributor, is a busy fool, is the way they describe it, i.e. somebody, as you've just described, who's going out, they're actively trying, but they've got the wrong information, or they're giving misinformation, or they're getting, into the wrong places. That can do more damage to your brand than actually not having anybody in the market at all. And this is really, I think, important when you're looking at distributors. I think people sometimes rush into it and just think, I've just got to get a distributor in the market. But it's about getting the right distributor and then working with them effectively over that period of time. And even when you do all that, we're realists, and this is what, Barry's alluding to and what Nishant's just been speaking about. Even when you do all that, things can go wrong. But the point is, and the point of this session is that if you do the right things, there's a lot less chance of things going wrong. But you're still going to have challenges. And a manager of mine once said, and I think this is pertinent for this, that relationships are like a bank account. If you've been putting money in, which are all the things we've been talking about, you've been cultivating them, you've been working with them, you've been going out with them, you've been making sure you're enjoying what you're doing, you've been giving them bonuses, you've been putting money in the account, then when things aren't going that smoothly or there's a challenge, you've actually got something in the account to take out. You've got some goodwill you've got the desire for that distributor to work with you effectively to help overcome those challenges. And I think that's one of the key things for me in terms of when you're trying to work with your distributor. So, I mean, do you have any examples of where you've had a good distributor? So it's a follow-on, I suppose, from Barry's question, where you've had a good distributor, things haven't been going as you wanted, but because you've got a good relationship, you've been able to turn that around. What were some of the things you would have been able to do with that?
Yeah, I think, if, again, if a distributor is maybe not performing as well as you had expected, it's really important to sort of deep dive into the reasons why. And that gives you insight into how best to manage it going forward. If you look at the US, for example, there are certain states and certain territories which are more challenging than others. And it doesn't always necessarily boil down to the distributor. It could be just the market that they're in. Some states, some cities are slower to adopt new technologies. And in those cases, maybe the sales cycle is taking slightly longer than you would have expected. So maybe it's not always necessarily the distributor's, fault, for example, but really trying to uncover what are the reasons. In some cases, a distributor may have 6 or 7 reps working within the company. And actually, it could be that 2 of the reps are not performing very well. They just maybe don't understand the product. They're not articulating the messages correctly. So again, you can uncover variances within the distributor itself. It doesn't necessarily boil down to just that distributor not performing well. It may be particular reps within the company that maybe not doing the best possible job. So uncovering some of that, can there be some changes made to that structure of the distributor? Is it a matter of maybe, reducing their coverage in terms of states and maybe finding other partners for some of those states? So yeah, there's a lot to kind of uncover, but I do believe a lot of it can be turned around once you do understand, what are the specific reasons. And again, just often it boils down to those early days, the support you provide just is just critical. Being in the field with them. If you don't do that, you don't spend time in the early days, then unfortunately they haven't had that education and knowledge that they need to see success in the market.
Yeah, no, and so it all bears back to that same thing. And it's about getting the right people, managing them in the right way, understanding that they're an extension of your team and treating them like that. Because then, number one, you're more likely to identify problems before they become problems. And if they do then expand out into a problem, then you're actually much more able to handle it in a professional way that leads to a positive resolution if you've got that good relationship with them already. And just to add, I've just seen a message from Amanda from South Africa, and she said, actually, which I know she's done herself, it's possible to effectively create your own distributor if you've got a passionate and committed, as well as capable, she's put in brackets, employee who wants to move continent to countries and set it up for you. So, yeah, there's lots of different ways that you can ensure that you get a good distribution network. But whichever way you do it, the fundamental thing from this session that we should be taking away is really all about ensuring that that you understand that finding the right distributor is really just a start, but you need to find the right distributor and then think of it like recruiting a CEO using the ideal partner profile, as I call it. And then you need to manage those relationships carefully and invest in growing it to ensure your success in new markets. Communication, collaboration, measurement, and support are all very, very key. So, I mean, we're coming to the end. We've got 4 minutes left. So any questions, please put them in there. But, I just want to say thanks very much to Nishant. And I was speaking to Nishant about this before, I'm going to be doing a series of podcasts around health tech and healthcare. And I'm sure this is the second time I've had Nishant on, and I'll be getting him on again because people always learn new things when we get in a call together. So thank you very much for coming, Nishant.
Thank you for having me. And I hope it was useful for all, and look forward to seeing any questions that we can help answer.
Yeah, so while people are writing a question, I'll just wrap up and do a bit of promo for myself. So yeah, anyway, a strong distributor partnership, obviously, as we've established, I think can accelerate your business. But as I said, it requires clear expectations set at the beginning, mutual trust and continuous engagement throughout that period that you're working with them, because that will then lead to continuous growth that everybody obviously is trying to achieve when you're in healthcare exports. And that's exactly what Nishant has been elaborating on through examples of what he's actually done with distributors. And within the Healthcare Export Accelerator in Module 3, this is what we talk about. We go through how to identify the right markets and distributors with a laser-focused approach. And then in Module 5, we talk about deep into managing and expanding your distributor relationships so that it gives you a blueprint for your international growth, specifically in those modules around markets. If what you've heard today resonates in terms of, some of the advice that we're giving, then obviously I recommend that you sign up to the program so that you can start learning more strategies and going deep into these strategies in your business. So Juan, who's a channel manager from Endomac, says, what would be the perfect distributor size? How long's a piece of string? But I'll let you, I've got some thoughts on it, but you fire away on that.
Sorry, just to clarify, when you say distributor size, are you talking about in terms of the size of the business, in terms of how many people they have within the team?
I think he's saying, well, if you're going to market, do you want a big distributor that's got loads of products and loads of channels, or do you want a small specialist distributor?
Yeah, a great question. And I think it's very context dependent. It depends on the type of product that you're selling. Again, it sort of boils down to, is it something that's, a high volume product that needs, high volume product is one thing, but, once the product has been adopted by the hospital, for example, what are the ongoing support requirements? Is there regular education that's required? Do you need to be in clinical cases regularly? So that's where, it comes down to the sort of size of the team. But really, it's the ability to manage the accounts, initially sell into the accounts and then manage those accounts going forward. Very much does depend on the specific territory as well as the product, because in the US, for example, independent distributors is what we use, and they typically covered 3 or 4 or 5 states each. So these are small, almost sort of family-owned businesses that had a lot of expertise and a lot of experience in the market. But if you're looking at other markets outside of the US, if you're looking at France, just as an example, maybe you have a larger distribution partner that actually covers the whole of the country. They have a bigger sales team. They have relationships with the hospital groups within that territory. So it really is context dependent, I think. In our case, the smaller, more specialized distributor made a lot of sense rather than a national player that maybe didn't have that level of expertise.
Okay, thank you very much, Nishant. And we're out of time, and I always try to be rigorous with my timings.
Thank you all.
So I really hope that you found that useful and took some takeaway. So thank you very much to Nishant. In summary, the quick 5 points that Nishant mentioned that we need to take into consideration is really identifying and finding the right distributor. Once you've found them, it's about managing them effectively and then deepening that relationship so they become a partner, and then growing that partnership so the sales start to explode, and then looking at how you overcome challenges and hopefully head those challenges off before they actually become real problems.
And if you want to pick up the show notes, head over to the salesaccelerationformula.com/podcast-show-notes, and you'll be able to subscribe to our mailing list and get show notes for every single episode. And as always, subscribe, like, and share with your friends, colleagues, and anyone else who you think may be interested. But most of all, keep the feedback coming so that we can continue to improve and give you more of what you like. Hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and as I always do. Keep listening and keep growing.